Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I wanted to make an updated endgame guide for those of you guys that are just getting into the endgame and you're a little bit confused as to what to do, but also for those of you that are currently in the endgame and you just want to know how to efficiently spend your time. I have previously made an endgame guide, but I wanted to make an updated one because a lot of stuff has changed with the game, and I've also learned a bunch of stuff after pretty much my almost 350 hours of playtime at this point. I have almost 3 level 100 characters. I've played the game quite a lot and I've learned quite a lot, so I want to go over everything with you guys so you guys know exactly how you should be spending your time. The campaign starts the second that you finish the campaign and you unlock Nightmare difficulty. You unlock Nightmare difficulty simply by just doing a capstone dungeon in Kyoshad. It says level 50, you can do it at literally any level you want. It's pretty easy. I did it at level like 42. If you're having a hard time, I'd recommend looking up a build guide or maybe just getting a few more levels until you do it. It ends up being right here. The second that you complete that, you now gain access to Nightmare difficulty and the entirety of the endgame opens up for you. Ironically though, your goal once you get into Nightmare difficulty is to, as efficiently as possible, get to Torment. The reason that you care about Torment more than being a Nightmare is because the mobs are higher level, so you're going to get more XP for fighting them, and you're also going to get access to Ancestral items. Ancestral items and sacred items are basically just more powerful versions of the previous tier. So sacred items are going to be more powerful versions of the normal gear that you're getting on the ground, and then ancestral is going to be more powerful than sacred items. So at this point, I'm literally only using ancestral items because they simply just roll higher stats and it's just way better for my character, right? So your goal the second you get into Nightmare is to actually get out of Nightmare and get into Torment. You get into Torment the same way that you got into Nightmare by just doing a capstone dungeon, but this one is a good bit harder than the previous, and I'd recommend being at least level 60. Most people can probably do it comfortably at like level 65. So your goal now that you're a Nightmare, you're roughly around 45 to level 50. Goal is to, as efficiently as possible, make your character stronger while also getting some XP and leveling up so you can then unlock Torment. At this stage, I would highly recommend looking up a build guide. I have a ton over on my website and also on my YouTube channel, just so you know what gear you should be looking out for, and it will make it significantly easier, going into Torment and stuff. But obviously, feel free to play the game exactly how you want. So now that we have access to the entirety of the endgame, we'll talk about all these systems and how you want to interact with them. But the first thing that you want to do is actually start getting some sacred items on your character. The item power on just the raw gear is not nearly as significant as it is on your weapons. The item power on your weapons is going to determine the overall DPS stat, and that DPS stat is going to determine how much damage your base skill does, because your skill is going to scale off of your weapon damage. So getting a sacred weapon early on is incredibly important. However, replacing all your normal gear with sacred stuff is not nearly as important. It will just make the possible roll range higher. So for example, my movement speed on this boots goes up to 26% on a sacred item. This would probably cap out at maybe 18%, and on a normal piece, I don't know, maybe like caps out at like 14 or something like that. Not a big deal. The item power on your actual gear itself only matters at certain thresholds. I'm not going to go over all of that, but the item power on the actual gear items is not nearly as significant as it is on the weapon. When you're looking at gear, always just look at what stats are on it, but talk more about that later. So now that you've gotten Nightmare mode unlocked, the first thing you should do while trying to get some sacred items equipped, particularly weapons, is by unlocking your Renown. I'll move my camera real quickly here. So the reason that you care about Renown is because of these skill points. I'm on a Necromancer. I already did this all on my Rogue. So as you can see, I still retain all the extra bonuses here, but the game thinks that I haven't done it yet because on separate characters you can do it again. It doesn't matter because I have all the bonuses that are relevant. The reason you care about the skill points is, well, they're skill points that'll drastically increase your power, right? So the first thing that you want to do is just do all the strongholds that you have not done, and I'd recommend getting some waypoints out of the way so you can easily traverse the map. Strongholds give you 100 renown per, and there's 3 in each zone, so you could very easily do the strongholds and then get a few waypoints and maybe do like a couple side dungeons here and there, and then you'll actually get all the skill points. The strongholds, as you can see, are just scattered around the map. They're pretty easy to do. Probably wouldn't take you more than like a couple hours to get them done and get the skill points. If you wanted to go the extra mile, you can get the Paragon points. This will take you probably like a day or two of just straight up grinding the Renown, but the Paragon points is a massive increase in power, and I would recommend doing it at some point or another. The Altars of Lilith are something that I'd highly recommend doing after you have done the strongholds, or even before them if you prefer, because these give you not only a good amount of renown, you get 28 or so per zone. I guess it depends. On average, probably a 31 per zone. They give you 10 renown each, but also each Altar of Lilith is going to give you different stats, so you can get upwards, I think it's about 180 per stat if you get every single altar in the game. And as you can see, my stats are pretty high, so getting like 180 skill damage is literally 18% damage, and you also get, depending on your character, you'll get like crit chance, resource gen, etc. So I'd highly recommend going for the altars, but again, that takes a very long time. If you want to get all the Paragon points, it takes very long. The best way to do that is just do all the strongholds, get every waypoint in the game, do the altars, and then afterward, the most efficient thing is either in a group of 4, everybody goes and does their own dungeon, and you get completion for all of it, or you just do the side quests. The side quests are particularly good. Can't see it here, you get 20 renown per side quest, and they can be pretty quick or slow depending upon which one you actually do. Now that you've gotten the renown for your skill points or your Paragon points, the next thing that you want to do is just start leveling up and making your character stronger, right? So the single best way to level up is by doing Nightmare Dungeons. You unlock Nightmare Dungeons by doing your very first Tree of Whispers. Let's quickly talk about Tree of Whispers. So it's a pretty simple thing. Basically just randomly throughout the map, there will be different areas that give you Grim Favors. You collect 10 Grim Favors, you go turn it in, you get a little cash, gives you some XP and some loot. It's really insignificant. You only need to do this one time to start out with to get your first Nightmare Sigil and actually unlock Nightmare Dungeons as a whole. Outside of that, I would not recommend farming this because it just gives you not nearly enough XP in my opinion. And your overarching goal should pretty much just be living in Nightmare Dungeons. The reason that Nightmare Dungeons are so good is because they recently buffed the XP, so they give you about 80% more, don't quote me on that, about 80% more XP than fighting mobs in the open world. But also, if you fight mobs that are 3 levels higher than you, you get 25% more XP, and that continues to scale based on the monster level. So ideally, you want to fight mobs that are about 3 to 5 levels higher than you because you'll continue to get increased XP. The tier on the Nightmare Dungeon is actually just monster level plus 54. So if I have a tier 53, the mobs will be level 107. An easy way to do the math on this, if you are trying to just farm Nightmare Dungeons that are pretty easy but also going to give you good XP, is just do your character level minus 51. So if I'm level 100, I would want to do Nightmare Dungeons that are minus 51 of 100, which would be 49, because if I do a Nightmare Dungeon that's 49, the mobs will end up being level 103. Obviously, feel free to pick your own difficulty. If you want to do ones that are way higher, or you want to do ones that are at your exact level, definitely feel free to do that. I would just at least recommend doing dungeons that are 3 levels higher than you. Outside of getting your first sigil, the way that you can get more sigils is literally just while you're doing them, a bunch of sigils will just drop on the ground, but you can also craft them. So if you end up getting some sigils that have some pretty crappy affixes, which we'll talk about in a second, you can salvage them, you get some sigil powder, and then you can end up crafting more depending on the difficulty that you're looking for, or a cost of sigil powder. When it comes to which dungeons you want to do, I wouldn't care too much about the exact dungeon because you're not going to have like an infinite amount of sigil powder. I'd recommend just avoiding dungeons that have really annoying affixes. I'm not going to go over all of them, but some of the most annoying ones are going to be where vulnerable lasts 60% longer, suppressor effect can be annoying depending upon your build, cold enchanted is really bad, lightning storm is terrible unless you're like playing a druid or barbarian. It's really annoying to deal with lightning storm. Range defenders, any of the defenders can be pretty bad. Like there's crit defenders where you do 60% less crit damage, that sucks. Range defenders, if you're playing a necromancer, 60% less damage from distant targets. There's also a 40% less damage from close targets. I'd really just take a look at these and just see which ones you like using. Like critical resist, oh my god, that basically makes me do 60% less damage. Just look at the affixes and try to look for ones that have some pretty good benefits, but also literally just anything that is just going to nerf your build, like the crit one, I literally just instantly dismantle those. Actually, doing the Nightmare Dungeon is pretty easy, and you end up getting a pretty good amount of XP, or a crazy amount of XP, but it also is good for leveling up your glyphs. Which glyphs you want to do is dependent upon your build, so just look up the build guide. You'll get glyphs by just doing Nightmare Dungeons, and you want to just level them up and then slot them into your Paragon board, so you get a whole bunch of extra stats. While you're doing the Nightmare Dungeons, I'd highly recommend picking up almost everything that you get on the ground. The reason for that is that you need a ton of crafting materials in order to not only upgrade your gear, but also to imprint legendary aspects on your gear. So as you can see, you need I have a ton of baleful fragments, and you need a lot of these baleful coilings, etc., in order to actually upgrade and imprint on your gear. So I'd recommend picking up everything and then salvaging legendary items. And if you need some gold, make sure to sell some items that are non-legendary, but definitely salvage all of the legendary items probably till about level 75, and sell maybe 30% of the stuff that you get. This ratio of salvage to sell will definitely change based on your current situation, but early on, you need a ton of crafting materials. When it comes to which weapons you actually want to make sure that you're imprinting and upgrading, I would not recommend imprinting on items that are not particularly good. At least have it be sacred, and at least make sure it has like 2 of the 4 stats that you care about, because it is really expensive to actually be imprinting your gear, and you don't want to be spending a lot of materials on gear that kind of sucks, right? One quick thing is that you can upgrade your gear to like about rank 3 or rank 4 pretty inexpensively, but the 5th rank is going to be quite expensive, and you can also enchant your gear. Enchanting the gear can also be incredibly expensive. As you can see, rerolling this costs 7 million, but it's because I rerolled it a ton of times. A quick tip here is if you have an item that is just normally yellow, here I'll move my camera again. If you have just a rare piece of gear, you can actually reroll this, and it will be cheaper than if it were legendary. So you want to reroll rare items first, and then you want to imprint them with a legendary aspect. I wouldn't recommend spending too much gold on items unless they are literally perfect items and you're going to use them for quite a while. But you could very easily just reroll it like one time real quick, and then just see, if you got something good. If you didn't get something good, not a big deal, but don't like break the bank on this. But as you can see, for enchanting and also even max upgrading some items that you get, it's going to cost you Forgotten Souls. In order to get these Forgotten Souls, you actually have to do the Helltide. The Helltide pops up every other hour. As you can see, it's only going to last for another 10 minutes. It's just in a random zone, and basically what this is just a different version of the zone where there's just a bunch of demon mobs, and these mobs are going to drop aberrant cinders. You use these cinders to then open up chests. The reason that we care about these specific chests is because they are going to give Forgotten Souls. So you want to go in here and only open up the chests called the Gift of Mysteries. These are randomly layered throughout the map, and you can open up about 2 to 4 of them per Helltide, and these are going to give you the Forgotten Souls. The normal chests that you're just going to find running around the Helltide are not going to give you the Forgotten Souls. You care about the souls for upgrading your gear and also rerolling like I was just showing you. You can tell where the mystery chests are going to be by just opening up helltides.com, and you can see these people upvoted these chests here, so that the Pilgrim's Cave and at the Plains of Attrition. You need 175 cinders in order to open these. The best way to get cinders is just run around and do all these events. The events are going to give you obols, but they're also going to give you a decent bit of cinders because usually there's a lot of mobs. Alternatively, you can just, run around and kill mobs. At the top of the hour, so as you can see at 12:05, so 5 minutes ago, these chests actually reset, meaning you can get up to 4 to 6 chests per Helltide. So for example, if this Helltide started at like 12:40, for example, there would be multiple chests up, and then at exactly 1 o'clock, those chests would reset, and then you could end up opening more of them. So I'd highly recommend just going to the Helltide so that you can farm out a bunch of Forgotten Souls. Even if you don't need them right now, you're definitely going to need them later. While you're doing those events in the Helltide, you'll end up getting a lot of obols, which is a fantastic way to try to find particular legendary aspects. So for example, if I am looking for a ring legendary, which is very hard for me to get, such as this exposed flesh, I'd want to spend all of my obols gambling on rings so that I could try to, get some ancestral rings or whatever. Or if there's just like a piece of gear that is particularly weak for you, like your sword or something, you could spend a lot of obols to try to get a good sword. If you are under level 73, this is only going to give you sacred items. The second that you get to level 73, all of the Obol Gambling will give you the option to get ancestral items. Make sure to wait to gamble until you're level 73. You don't really care about XP anymore, and the only thing that you're trying to improve on your character is just getting better loot, or you're just trying to farm a lot of raw materials and gold. I'd recommend checking out my previous farming video that is different than the sigil farming one. This one is going to be better for getting a lot of loot. Basically, there's a side quest dungeon you can do that has an unbelievable amount of mobs there that you can just kill very quickly in like 2 minutes, get a full bag of inventory. Alternatively, you can go and run the Older's Cave in a group as well, and that gives you a ton of loot. But just check out that previous video if you're interested in that, and just ignore everything regarding XP because that video was done prior to the Nightmare Dungeon buffs. So yeah, that is pretty much it for the video. As a quick TLDW for those of you guys that didn't want to watch the whole thing, basically the second that you end up getting into Nightmare difficulty, the first thing you want to do is unlock all of the strongholds, get all of your Renown done so you can get these skill points. If you feel like it, optionally you can go and get all the Paragon points and the Altars of Lilith for even more character power. Now that you're in Nightmare difficulty, you just want to do a Grim Favor the first time so that you can get a Nightmare Sigil, which is your best way of farming XP. So just do all the Nightmare Sigils that you can. Try to do dungeons that are about 3 to 5 levels higher than you. While you're doing Nightmare dungeons, you want to pick up everything off of the ground, salvage maybe 60 to 70% of it, equip the sacred items that are good, upgrade them a few times, don't max upgrade them maybe 4 times so that you get a lot of the additional bonus, and don't imprint legendary aspects on gear unless it is a pretty good sacred piece, maybe like has 2 of the 4 good stats that you're looking for. Try to avoid very annoying affixes on Nightmare dungeons and just make sure to craft more of them, and if you can, push the Nightmare dungeons a little bit higher than like 5 levels higher than you so that you can get even more XP. And remember that nightmare dungeons are just the level plus 54, so a 53 would end up being level 107 monsters. Also, the higher the level of the nightmare dungeon, the more glyph XP that you'll end up getting. Every other hour, you want to spend some time in the Helltide opening up the mystery chests by using helltides.com to see where the mystery chests are actually located, farm some mobs, get all the aberrant cinders, and then open up the mystery chest so that you can get forgotten souls so you can actually full upgrade your gear and then enchant your gear. For the most part, I would just pretty much ignore doing things that are not nightmare dungeons and things that are like the Tree of Whispers because it is just not efficient for XP. And if you care only about getting loot, just check out my previous video on the loot farming. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you ended up finding the video helpful, please feel free to drop a like, subscribe, whatever. Leave it down in the comments if you have any questions or if you have any additional tips for endgame. But the endgame in Diablo 4 is pretty simple. Just follow everything that I said and it should be a smooth ride. Thanks for watching and I will see you guys later.